Hello, I'm Pastor Joe Butch, and this is The Dive. I'm here with Dustin Clark, as well as our preaching pastor of the week, Brad Salyers. Don't call him Bradley, he's Bradford. And this is episode 2. Who said we wouldn't make it?
Yeah,
Wouldn't make it.
we've already made it past the first. Yeah.
Who said
We're
we
not
wouldn't
newbies
make it?
anymore, right?
Yeah, guys, like we're pros now.
Yeah,
So it's our second take of The Dive. The whole point of this podcast, whatever we're show thing, is to go off of the message that was preached the Sunday before and dig a little bit further into it, maybe spend some extra time in spots where you can't necessarily in a setting that's as big as a Sunday morning, and we can just sit down here at the table and dive into more of the message. I know there's probably other podcasts with this name, but they're not as cool as this one.
No,
So-
I mean, surprisingly, the dive was like not really taking that much, like just the dive.
Really?
Yeah, because I thought I was gonna have to do GPC,
But it didn't
the
have-
dive. Now the email I did, but like a lot of the other stuff, like just took like there's some other like stuff, but for this, like no,
Now we're diving into the dive.
now we're diving
Look at
into
us.
the dive.
Yeah. But I was sick last week. Hit me pretty good. That was good timing. Hit me pretty good. Not contagious anymore, fellas, so don't worry about that.
Thankfully.
We'll fix that in post.
yeah. So I talked to Pastor Brad. It was like Friday, and I was like, "Hey, man, you might want to be ready for, Sunday." And Sunday rolled around, and I was still hacking up a lung and sniffling a bunch. And I was like, "All right, Brad, go ahead and take this." And you did, awesome. So why don't you drive this week, Pastor Brad?
Cool. Yeah. So this week, God kind of led us to 2 Corinthians chapter 4. We read the whole book, or the whole chapter anyway. And it was good. I read out of the Message version. Not everybody likes the Message. Some older folks, more traditional folks don't read out of the Message. But
We could talk about that for a second.
let's talk about that.
So the Message is not a translation;
That
it's a
is
paraphrase.
Absolutely.
And so if you approach it with that knowledge and that understanding, I think it can be pretty useful.
Yeah.
You should not just read the Message.
Sure.
Absolutely.
Like that shouldn't be the only thing that you use as scripture, because it's a paraphrase rather than a direct word for word translation. So meaning like you could read a section and just go, it means kind of like this.
Sure.
That's more paraphrasing rather than, no, this word
Like
means
a it's more like a commentary
Yeah.
in a
Yes.
little bit of a way.
Sort of.
a little bit,
But I would
but less. Yes, a little bit.
a little bit. But like to be honest with you, people don't understand that a lot of them are paraphrases.
Oh,
And I'm not
oh,
gonna.
we-
and
are
I'm
we
not
gonna get there?
I'm not gonna go into that. And you know what? I don't want to get into people's favorite Bibles. I don't want people to turn it off right here.
We're
So
gonna
we'll just
stop.
go from there.
Yeah.
But just want to let you know that I'm not a big fan of the Message, just because I think it's a paraphrase. I think it goes a little bit out there. No, not out there, but it's
I think it can be useful in a context.
sure.
So,
Yes.
so
But
what we'll do in this podcast then is I'll use a lot of these and thous, and
Nope.
that'll suffice
think-
for your King James version only.
I think that's a paraphrase.
Well, I mean, we need to. I'm not sure we're doing that. Oh.
I mean, it's meant. The King James. Okay, it's meant to be. It's meant to be like written in poetry. Like it's meant to flow really well. Let's just say the Koine Greek didn't flow really well. That's all
No,
I'm
I
saying.
like the NASB
NASB.
because it's like
It's the closest.
it's
Yes.
close to
choppy.
Greek as you can get, and sometimes it's like, what? I have to go back and read again, but I like it because
Yes.
I know that's the. But I'm not afraid either to like. There's a Message Bible sitting right on my desk
Sure.
too, and I'll open up and go.
It's easier to understand.
Yeah.
It's easier.
It
It
can
puts
be.
it more into English. It puts it more in English, and you just have to be. It's good to like look and say, okay, and look at the NASB or
Yes.
other translations and say, is this matching up? But
Yeah.
no, it's not like you're not going to hell for reading the
Right.
Message.
So
Okay.
one of the things I love to do when I'm studying, I have a physical Bible, and I got it when I was in my teens. But man, I love to study off of my iPad.
Yeah.
Because the Bible app, like I can have access to just about every translation
sure.
or paraphrase.
And you can like split them. You can
Yeah.
compare. You can compare.
Yeah, side by
Right
side.
next to each other.
There's so many things
Yeah.
on the internet that are like that we can look at those together and we can say, hey,
Oh, for sure.
and the reason, like I said, I don't normally preach out of the Message. As a matter of fact, I don't think I've ever solely preached out of the Message like I did this last Sunday.
Yeah.
But the words were just so colorful, the way
Sure.
that Eugene Peterson explains 2 Corinthians chapter 4.
Sure.
We're not making Eugenes anymore, are we?
No,
We need to bring the name back.
you need to have another son and name him Eugene.
For me,
Maybe.
when I always think of Eugene, I think of Odyssey. You guys ever
Adventures in Odyssey?
Avengers and Odyssey?
Yeah.
Eugene.
Yep.
Like.
I just know of Adventures in Odyssey. I don't
like,
know what it is.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think
So-
that's my wife's thing more than mine.
Yeah, I mean that's a huge Christian program, and no, I had some like when I became a Christian and going on car rides, they would put Adventures of Odyssey, and some of it is really good though. Some of it's really good. Like
Yeah.
there's some really good ones.
So yeah, the message.
The message about so that's it in a nutshell. But we started by breaking down basically one of the things that I deal with as a person is a lot of self-doubt and a lot of negative voices, like and I don't feel like I am alone in that.
Yeah.
And God was just kind of speaking to me this week about how we're going to deal with that, how we're going to kind of combat that, because if you don't have a plan for it when it comes, then you're completely wasted, right? Like you don't have an idea of where you're going. So we looked at 2 Corinthians chapter 4 and just kind of broke it down in those ways. Yeah. So I started out by talking about the first two verses there, and I said that I really like Eugene Peterson's wording in this, and this is what hooked me on the way that he said this. He's in verse 1, he says, "Since God has so generously let us in on what he's doing." So generously let us in.
Yeah.
And that kind of fed into my first point that that it's God's mission, and he brings us to that. And that's a freeing part when we think about that, and not just focusing on like, what do I want? Where am I going? Like, what is all of this stuff, or how can I change this up? It's God's mission. It's not my mission.
How often do we put more of the weight on our shoulders than we're supposed to?
Oh yeah,
And then we get confused at why we feel like burdened.
absolutely.
and like, God, why did you do this to me? And God's like, I didn't do that to you, man. Like, you're doing this to you. Like, I'd prefer if you'd stop it. But we get angry with him and frustrated, and we're just totally misguided in what the problem is.
Yeah.
And it's so important to understand what the problem is so you can address it, right?
Yeah.
And there are often times where we try to pull it into, well, it's my plan, and I'm going to go save people, and you might not even mean to do that. You can be really well intended and want people to know Jesus, and like it's not about you and all that stuff, but take that mission onto your own shoulders too much so that you forget that, oh, actually it's God's mission and he's inviting us on with him instead of he tags along with us. Right?
Didn't I joke about that? Like this morning, we're talking about what does God want me to preach? And I said, no, I just find the verse and I said, God, this is what I'm preaching. This is what I, you know what I mean?
You're going to fit into what I think.
Yeah. You're in my box.
But I think that like that's so many reasons why people don't become Christian is because they have this idea of who they think God is.
Yeah.
And when they become they think, but if I give my life to Jesus, I have to do this. And they're like, well, that doesn't fit what I think God is. So they'll still believe in God and they'll still call themselves maybe Christians, but they're not doing what the Bible wants or the Bible says and what God says.
Buffet Jesus?
Buffet Jesus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good
I
We
just-
talked about that, right?
I think so.
Yeah.
Just picking and choosing
You
what.
guys like Golden Corral?
Yeah.
I have lots of nostalgic memories of Golden Corral as a child.
I like Golden Corral. I dislike the chocolate fountain that they have. So in the early days of Golden Corral, they didn't have that. They just had cut meat and just all kinds of a spread. But then when you start adding chocolate in and people's hands,
You're a Ryan Steakhouse guy, aren't you?
I do like Ryan's.
I can
Yeah,
tell.
pretty
I
much.
can tell.
Yeah.
But
Picking and choosing.
picking
Yeah.
and choosing. Yeah, picking and choosing. And you can get yourself really messed up in that situation because God doesn't bless that, and I think God will make himself real to you if you really search for him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But
It's a quick way to burn out.
It is.
That's like the quickest way to burn out.
Because like you're expecting God to do something up that you're not. You know what I mean? Like you're expecting God to do something that God's not going to do.
Yeah.
Very true. Very true. And I think the biggest thing that we can do is finally recognizing that, right? Like that what we're doing is displeasing to God and missing out on His mission. It's like the concrete story that I told. Like
I love
trying to finish out concrete and
great.
trying to go and then like not even knowing what I needed to do, but God had that plan. And
Tell that story again.
Okay.
For people maybe that missed the sermon or is not going to go watch the sermon.
Yeah.
Or watching this.
It was such a good
Because
story.
it was such a good story for real.
Well, when he told me about it that day,
Yeah.
I was like, I won't steal that from you, but you better use that one. Because it's really good.
Yeah.
No, it really is.
Well,
Yeah.
and God knew the timing of all of it.
Yeah, we didn't know at that
No,
point that you were
no,
going to
we
preach
didn't-
it. Yeah.
didn't have a clue. A couple weeks later, but so we were finishing some concrete. I'll tell the abbreviated story. We were finishing some concrete here at the church property, and I'm not a concrete guy. I don't do that self.
Nor do I
professed.
want to be.
Yeah, I'm the same.
By the way.
that is rough stuff.
Yeah.
But we had made our plans and we had got our pour ready, and the day came to pour, and the truck shows up. And he starts dumping concrete into our hole that we've got, and we start leveling it out, and we realized really quickly that we ordered too little concrete.
Like half as much as we needed.
Yeah, we literally had to order another truckload. So we sent the truck back to the concrete plant, and we had made a plan B about how to deal with this. And the guys, everyone that was here helping, Seth, Joe, Bob, and Wayne, they split out to do their own thing for a little bit, and I was staying there trying to finish up the concrete that we poured. And Joe calls me like 5-10 minutes after he leaves and says, "Hey, where I am, it's sprinkling the rain." And
And then it started dumping.
yeah. And I'm like, oh, all right. So I hang up the phone with Joe, and I start praying, out loud, because I was the only one around. So like I do that sometimes. And I said, God, just give me 3, 4, 5 good hours of this. Let me get this concrete poured, and we'll be okay. And no sooner than I got that out of my mouth, like literally it started sprinkling the rain. I was like, all right, really? Like we're going here. Like I've got to deal with this. Like what are you doing to me, God? And then it started pouring down harder, and it like for the span of a few minutes, like it came a pretty good rain, and I'm like, like what is happening? And I'm just like I'm frustrated with God. I'm nervous in the situation, but I just keep finishing, and the more I finished, the easier it got to finish. Like if you don't know anything like about concrete, like I don't, like it takes, like you have to let the aggregate go to the bottom, and the cement comes to the top, and it makes it smoother, right? And well, I didn't know that I had poured our concrete too dry. Like the truck adds the water for you, and you tell them how much you want. And I had stopped the guy too soon, and I'd not added enough water. Well, God knew that. Like I didn't have to get in the way of that. But so it just was this awesome illustration. Like I was telling Joe about it, and I started crying.
Oh, I was
a
like
little bit.
emotional.
It's like,
Yeah.
come on, man. But like he knows the plan. He knows the place that we're going, and even when we don't see it, even when we can't help ourselves.
And this is how we know God is patient and merciful, because like you're literally praying, God, please let it stop raining right now.
Yeah.
And he's like, you idiot. You need this rain. Like I sent this rain for you. Are you like, what are you talking about? You want, this rain is legitimately for this project here. And it's perfect. Like how, and it finally dawns on you, and you're like, oh, this is exactly what I needed. And that is, if that's not made up for preaching. That happened.
No, yes, no, 100%.
It's
Like,
such
you can come to our church and look at the concrete pad, and you can say, like, oh, it's a little bit wavy, but it's still good.
It's perfect.
Yeah.
But it's such a good example of just regular everyday life of like, God, please keep this suffering away from me, or like take me out of this pain that I'm going through, or this undesirable thing that's happening. And God's like, no, the thing that's happening to you is for your benefit. Like you're going to see it at one point, and it's going to dawn on you. So like, don't worry about it. I got it.
Sure.
And like he sees so much more of this than we can comprehend. but it's hard when you're standing in the rain.
Yeah, and
To-
you're praying, and my mind goes back to the scripture, and I should have probably looked it up, but I believe it's Jesus, or it was Paul, one or the other, that was talking about, like, there's times that we don't even know how to pray, like it's a groaning that's coming out
Utterance.
of an utterance out of our spirit, and it was very much that day that, like, I was praying falsely, I was praying amiss, I didn't know what I was doing.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So I mean, it was a great story because it just when God is, that is what I wrote down. When God is working in your life, it might seem at that time He's making your life harder.
Yeah.
But He's actually working on you.
yeah,
And it actually, I talked, we talked about this last night, how it's like one of the perfect illustrations that when you're a parent, you'll understand this way more.
So
Because like, especially when you have little kids, like I can't tell you how many times a day that I'm like, Theo, just trust me.
Yeah.
And he's arguing with me like the other day there we made a fire and I'm trying, like he's standing 10 feet back trying to throw a leaf in like he's a quarterback. You know what I mean? He looks like Joe Burrow. Like it's just like, no, just kidding. But the leaf never is going to make it to the fire because it just floats away.
yeah.
And I'm like, it's okay to get closer. The fire isn't going to attack you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Don't put your hand in the fire. You'll be fine. Like it's not going to just wave out and just like latch onto you.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it's okay to get closer. It's okay to get closer. And he's like, he stepped closer and he's like, no, and he's scared. And that's what kids do. Like so many times you're just like, just trust me.
Yeah.
Please, just trust me. I promise you it's going to be okay. Or when you're trying to lift them up and they're like, they don't want to be held up in a certain way because they think you're going to drop them.
Yep.
And so they're like, no, no, no. And you're like, listen, I promise you're not going to fall. You're not going to be hurt. You're not going to die. Okay.
Probably.
Probably. I mean, but the thing is like, in the same way, God's like, just trust me, please, just trust me. Now I know, I do think that there are some situations that, it's possible that God could call you and you might die. I know that sounds crazy.
Yeah.
I know it sounds crazy, but that's like, there's missionaries that God was like, I want you to go to this place, and they ended up dying. And then the next missionaries that God sent, the place blew up for Christianity.
Yeah.
So but dead today and heaven tomorrow.
Yeah.
Like God has a purpose for all of us. But and that situation is that sometimes you're going through things in your life. As long as you're living for Christ and you're doing what God wants you to do, and you're not walking in any kind of sin, willfully sinning against God, because then it might be a teaching lesson at that point. But if you're that and God's walking you through things, God's like, just trust me. Just trust me.
Yeah.
And I know I'm talking a long time because that's what I do. But we were talking about trust, and I was telling him about the skit that I one of my favorite skits that I saw was this this girl, she just like in the skit, she just maybe becomes a Christian or has trouble with Jesus, trusting Jesus, and Jesus stands like right in front of her, and he's like, turn around, I want you to fall into my arms, and he's like, oh, I don't know if I can trust you.
Yeah.
I don't know. And then she's like, and she finally does it, and he's like right there. And Jesus is like, let's try again. So Jesus stands a little bit farther back. And she's like, oh, I don't know. But then she finally does it and trusts. And he's like, let's do it one more time. And this time he walks in front of her.
Yeah.
And he's
I've
like,
seen that.
fall backwards. Right?
Yeah.
And in those times, but I think that like God, like, as we walk with Jesus, it gets easier and easier to trust him. And but in times where we're like, it's impossible, that's when we start getting frustrated or like this, or we start like when God is really just trying to teach us something.
Yeah, he puts us in that smoke, and it makes it's uncomfortable. There's a psalm that talks about new wineskins. I don't know if you guys have read that, but the way that they made wineskins back in the Old Testament times is they would sew the skins together, and then they would put them in the smokehouse. So like the smoke and the heat, and it stretched them so that they were pliable and able to hold these new wineskins. And that's the kind of thing that, as you were talking, that I was thinking of, is like, it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be comfortable a lot of times. it's going to be smelly and stinky and like rough.
Sure.
But if we can make it through that, then we're going to be this vessel that God keeps throwing into us.
Was it your third point that was like, it's not, you're going to be, was that the rejection one?
Well, point 2 was that you not everybody's going to accept it.
Okay, it was the second one. Yeah.
Realize that it's not you. Like it's not you for, to try to make this decision for people. They have free will.
Yeah.
You have to just do what you do and let God kind of do the work, and His Holy Spirit convicts and His Holy Spirit moves. And
the hard part is when when the difficult things layer over each other. And so if you're dealing with like something's happening in life that maybe God is putting you through trying times, and that's piling up, and then rejection is piling up, and just the basic brokenness of our world, people die, things happen, and it all piles and piles up, and then you have to decide what you believe, or how you're going to live out what you believe, or if you're going to live out what you believe. And that's where people get lost a lot of times, right? Is where it's just thing after thing after thing, and then boom.
Yeah.
Parable of the sower.
You're on that one, man.
Yeah,
That's such a good parable.
It is really.
I'm just saying, like that's where faith is tested.
Yeah.
And so, no.
I think in those times when we're getting overloaded, like a real practical, a real practical idea of how to combat that, for me anyways, like we've got to find our pressure relief valve. If you are like, anything about air tanks or anything like that, like each one of them hydraulic tanks, they're built to where if you put too much of something in there, like it pops off, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't allow you to build up that much pressure. And one of the most beneficial things that I've found is that I know I can feel it when it's coming. I've got people in my life that are saying, "Hey, you're getting overloaded," and I know where I can go to get that relief. To a degree. And it doesn't make everything go away. It doesn't make the pressure stop building, but it lets a little bit of it off. So I'm a big practical guy. Like I want to help people through some of the stuff that they're dealing with. And in my life, that's what I try to do. I don't always do it perfectly, but
How could you?
Yeah. Who knew? I'm a flawed human, but And that does kind of go into the third point a little bit, is that you're probably going to have problems.
Yeah.
Probably going to have problems, but yeah, it just, that's the world that we live in. God has the ability to come in and miraculously take stuff away, and I don't want to lessen that. When I rewatched the sermon yesterday, I was thinking about that. I was like, man, maybe I was lessening God's power. Like He can come in and He can do supernatural things.
Yeah.
Like
absolutely.
He can heal cancer with the snap of a finger, or he can send you a check for $1 million out of the blue that you don't even know is.
He can speak the world into existence.
Yeah. He can do all of these things. They're called miraculous things for a reason, though. Like it's not the ordinary. So you're gonna struggle with stuff. It's going to happen, and once you can come to that realization, and just it's kind of freeing on that.
And whenever I say things like that, like God can this and this, I always have this thought in the back of my mind of like, well, there's people who God hasn't done that for, right? It's like God can heal, take cancer away, and someone sitting in the building, listening to the message is like, well, what about my cancer? Like, why hasn't He done that? Yeah. And like, it's difficult because I don't know what God is doing and what He's working through individual sufferings. I know who He is long term, and I know what He's about long term, but individual short term sufferings, I can't tell you exactly what's going on and how He's working that in people's lives. I know that when things happen for me, so like I grew up playing video games. Video games are awesome. There's a computer game I loved that was called Age of Empires, and you built up a civilization and you would go conquer another one. It was great. Loved it. But you could spend an hour like really building up a perfect civilization, right? And it would take at least an hour, and then go fight and maybe win or maybe lose. Or you could right off the bat, there was cheat codes you could put in that would give you all the resources you need, and you could just build up in 15 minutes a ridiculously overpowered civilization and go demolish everyone.
Yeah.
And like you could do that, but when you got to the end of that, it was always like, oh, I won. Whatever. But if you spent the hour and 15 on it and you went and won, you're like, oh yeah, like I earned that.
brain.
Yes, like I used my brain, I did it, I defeated the other person. Like that's what I'm talking about. And so sometimes that shortcut, like sometimes God works that way, but other times he's using that duration of the time that you're going through something to either teach you something, or maybe the part we miss other times because we can get kind of egocentric is maybe he's teaching somebody else something.
Oh,
and maybe, and this might sound weird to people who aren't believers, but like maybe your suffering is teaching somebody else something that they either need now or they're going to need going forward, and you're just a part of God's plan in what's happening with them too.
Yeah, sure. I mean, that's what when I had COVID. I mean, like there were so many other people dying around me, and I was just like, why am I the one that survived? You know,
so we could do this podcast.
So we could do this podcast.
Yeah. We need you, brother.
You know, because I was like the first person that they took care of on ECMO. That they kept.
That's why you lived.
And that's what. Yeah. No.
I mean, it's a God thing.
No. I think that like a part of me believes that like that hospital needed to start taking care of ECMO patients, and they needed somebody to be successful to show the rest of the hospitals that they can do it. I always said, God, I would have been okay with you using somebody else, but that's just. But there were so many people who died. And I asked myself, was like, why did I live, but they didn't make it, and but God probably used me in that situation for others to see victory, to see others that God is still moving, but it's definitely hard.
Yeah, and it's humbling in those times to think that the world's not about ourselves. Like if it is for somebody else, if our suffering is somebody else, then that lessens us, and that makes us not the center of our world.
Yeah.
And some of the biggest compliments I ever get is, you have such a humble spirit, or your humility's, and I'm like,
you're daggone right.
Yeah, my humility is huge.
Yeah.
I
have so much humility.
I'm the most humble that But that's just such a because life becomes not about you, and it's the reminder that that Paul wrote in Corinthians, that we're just old clay vessels. We're fragile. We're cracked. We're ugly. It's not about us. It's what's in us. And I just, this whole chapter just really it spoke to me personally, and it was just good to reread and prep for the sermon, and it was fun to preach. There are times that you get out and it's a little bit of a struggle, transparency, but Sunday wasn't a struggle. It was one of those that I knew God was driving it. I knew God had given the message. So
I mean, the perfect example of it's not about us is Jesus Christ himself.
Yeah,
that's true.
I mean, right? Like he could have easily just stayed in heaven. Yeah. I mean, he came.
It's nicer there.
Yeah, probably. I mean, that's what that's what they said.
That's what they're telling us.
I haven't experienced it yet, but
it's nicer there.
But I mean, he could have easily stayed in heaven and not came down, but he did it because he loves us.
Yeah.
And his whole life was for others.
Yeah. I always have this like picture of like, because Jesus is fully God and fully man.
Right, Brad?
I've heard that.
Fully God
and
fully man.
Yeah.
But I always have this image of like, he's born and he grows up and he's an adult and he's looking around, just sees all these people being idiots, and he looks up and says, you know what? I'm out of here. Like, but he doesn't do that. Like he doesn't just see what is currently around him. Like he knows like all of the sin that's going to happen. Like he takes it on the cross. So he knows the people who are going to sin going forward, and still decides to take that on. And that is just there will never be a more selfless decision made on the face of the planet.
No, because he knew.
He knows.
Yeah.
Like even like it's Veterans Day Sunday or Saturday, right? And talk about a selfless act, even volunteering or being drafted back in the day to go into service. But like I've read stories of guys that throw themselves on grenades and or charge a line to save other people, and like that happens. Like humans have selflessness in them because there's God in us, right?
Yeah.
Like that's the center of it. And not to devalue those sacrifices, but all of that, anything we can do pales in comparison to what Christ does on the cross there.
Absolutely.
And it doesn't get more selfless than that.
But God has never left his people behind. And story after story, God might punish you and leave you somewhere for you to be taught a lesson, but he never leaves his people. He'll never leave you on an individual level either. Yeah. It's, you know what I mean? Like he'll never leave you on an individual. He'll always carry you through whatever you're going through. And it just, the Moses story or the Israel's going through the desert. It's how quick do you want to make it from A to B?
That's a great point. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
How long is it going to take?
Yeah.
It's up to you.
Yeah. How long is it going to take? Like
it's up to you.
It's up to you. You know? It's up to you. Like, and what is God? It always goes back, even in your situation with the concrete, it's God, what are, at the moment, okay, God, what are you trying to teach me?
Yeah.
That should always be the first question. It should never be, the question why should never be, God, why are you doing this to me? It should be, God, what are you trying to teach me at this very moment?
Yeah.
And I think when you have that perspective, when you change your perspective on that, you start focusing on God and not on yourself and not on your own feelings. You focus on,
I took statistics 3 times.
Yeah. I cheated my way through that. Actually, I mean, this is off topic. I didn't cheat my way through statistics. The teacher literally said, this is what the teacher told us. He said, you can find the answer however you want, except from another person.
Oh,
that was the rule. And when I took statistics, I think I was taking preaching. I think I was taking Greek. I could care less about the statistics because he said you're never going to be on an island and be like, okay, I need statistics.
Yeah, I didn't understand why I had to take it.
Yeah,
it was dumb.
So but that's what he said. He said, well, AI wasn't there. I mean, if AI was around, he probably would have been like, you can't get it from AI either.
Yeah.
But no, what I did was the tests, you can take them as many times as you want, and they were always in the same order. Like the questions were always the same order. So what I would do is I would do A and then leave the rest blank. And then when I knew I got one right, I would go A, B, C. When that one got right, then I would move to the next question because I knew the first answer was B.
Wow.
So then I would go to the next question. I would take the test like 100 times, but I go, and then once I was happy enough with the 90% or whatever, because I didn't care about 100%. So I would just know that I passed, and I felt like I was cheating, but like the rules were, so I never learned.
You realize that you could have spent that time studying.
No,
and probably got it
15 times. Clearly. Like,
well, I didn't fail it because I didn't know it. I didn't try.
Yeah.
I mean, but it was just like I didn't have but believe it or not, it's really fast.
Yeah.
You have 10 questions, A, B, and I passed it. I found a way to pass that. No.
So how do you relate that spiritually to what?
No, that's a great story though. I love it.
Hey, when you got to pass statistics, I mean, it's okay to bet some towns. It wasn't cheating.
There's a lot of times when sometimes the issues that we're facing, it's like, okay, how long do you want to go through this?
Yeah.
If you would decide to change your tactic up here and go the way God's calling you to go, life's going to be a lot easier.
I've got a friend, you guys know him, James Brooks. Man, sometimes he says some stuff that is really impactful to me. And he said one time, he said, I'm not a slow learner, I'm a fast forgetter.
I like
thought,
that.
Man, I do too, because it kind of speaks to that. Like sometimes we get the message, but then we just forget it. Like we don't apply it.
That's every Sunday morning and into the afternoon.
Well, yeah, but by the time that Nazarene nap happens, there's something in your brain.
Did you preach on Sunday?
No. Who preached that?
Did somebody preach on Sunday?
Somebody did.
That's why we have the podcast.
Hey,
yeah,
and that's why I try to, and we talked about this yesterday too when we were setting up, is that what we try to do as a church is whatever we preach on Sunday morning, I try to continually go throughout the week with all of my posts, go back to Sunday morning, what the sermon was about. And I continually try to remind, and that's another reason why we're doing the podcast, because we want whatever was preached on Sunday morning to marinate with people and to live it out.
Preach.
Something like that.
No,
we don't want their hard work to go to waste of just 30 minutes to an hour. No.
Yeah, no, that's true. True. Very good. Yeah, so I think some of the big takeaways that we want to just slam home right before we close up, make sure that you know that God is calling you into newness every day. Like he's trying to grow you. He's trying to lead you into these places by listening to podcasts, by reading scripture through the week, by reflecting on the sermon. He's wanting to grow you into holiness so that you can be this valuable clay pot. I've already mentioned, what goes in makes us valuable, not necessarily who we are. So he definitely wants to make something of worth out of each and every one of us. He definitely has a mission and a plan for each and every one of us.
Yep.
So,
I wrote this down. I probably could have said this before, but we were talking about
We can fix it in post.
fixing him. No. This was last week. We talked about, because I told him, I was like, oh, one of the points that we talked about was the people aren't rejecting you.
Mm-hmm.
And like I was like, I know that's biblical. So let me go find out where that is in the Bible, because I remember. Do you guys know exactly where it is biblical? It's not just like something that we just say.
Yeah.
So like in Samuel, he says, but when they say, give us a king to lead us, this displeased Samuel. So he prayed to the Lord, and the Lord told him, listen to all the people that are saying to you, it is not you that they have rejected, but they have rejected me as the king. So Samuel's doing his job. Samuel's telling him, like, hey, God's supposed to be king. Because we all know the story. Israel.
That's chilling right there.
Yeah.
God's like, oh, they didn't reject you, man. They're rejecting me right now. Like my people.
Yeah,
The people
you're doing exactly what I want you to do.
Yeah.
They're rejecting, because we know the story, like God, Israel, the king was supposed to be God over Israel. And the people were like, no, we want a human, because everybody else has a human. Everyone else
has a king, God, and we want a king.
Yeah, God's like, I'll be your king. Yeah. All I know is, God, I want you to be my king, because I know that there are no other kings that come close to your power and to your wisdom and to your sovereignty.
Not what they were saying.
Take that one.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's crazy. Even after, that's a whole different podcast.
Yeah.
Even after everything that Israel saw, like,
They should know.
they should have known.
But hey.
I had some, so I don't know if you guys ever experienced this, but a lot of the Jews will go around, to different businesses or people, and they'll try to pray with people inside.
Mm-hmm.
And we were talking about, and I'm like, oh, what's up? Like, because I'm like, oh, I'm Jewish, and they said to me, they're like, oh, we love meeting people like you, because I'm just like, just winging it, having fun with them, and because they probably get a lot of rejection, they probably walk out,
sure.
And so and I was like talking about knowing 100% what's going to happen and this and that, and it all takes faith, because I was talking about, I believe in Jesus now, and I believe that Isaiah said, and I'm going through whatever. And we talked about this last week about praying, God, help me to use my testimony, help me to use, you know what I mean? Oh, bam, three of my people come in. That's what I'm saying.
My people.
I would say my people. I was like, my people.
My people.
I could never put it. It's fun. But I was like, man, but you know what? Back then, if you couldn't know 100%, like, there's something wrong with you. Like watching a Red Sea part, like right in front of your eyes, watching a fire lead you through the desert, watching manna fall from the sky. That's pretty 100% right there.
Yeah, well, it points back, though.
Watching Jesus Christ.
Remember, they weren't slow learners. They were fast forgetters. Like they thought, and like 40 years later, it's like, oh, that didn't happen. That, what about it?
But that's a whole different podcast.
That's a different podcast. But
it's good. It's good.
It's good.
I mean, and even at the beginning, because like when we'll wrap this up, but it's easy to be a fast forgetter. I mean, you're laying concrete, and you're like, I'm fast forgetting what God can really do. And then bam, God shows it. It's like, oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah, there it is.
Yeah. So just like to bring a full circle, like when you're going through situations that are hard, it's easy to forget what God just did for you last week.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
You know,
absolutely.
So like we always look at the Israelites like, how could they? What blah? And it's like,
Yeah.
well, we do the same thing with different stuff.
It's sports. It's everything. It's
Yeah.
you can have Bill Belichick's been 20 some years head coach in New England. He brought, I mean, how many championships? 6 championships, I think.
Now people
And,
hate
like,
him.
then winning season after winning season after winning season, and they're having a terrible year this year, and people are like, fire Bill, and it's like, if that guy hasn't done enough to help people, it's not what you've done; it's what have you done for me lately.
Yeah, but that's not the way we. But it's not the way we treat God. Just don't treat God that way.
Don't.
Right. And
Because
there's no better way to keep that fresh in your mind. If I don't go back and I don't do concrete work again for 6 years, I will have forgotten what I'm doing. But the way to keep what God's doing fresh in your mind is to continue to praise him for it every day.
oh, 100%.
Like remember, like a lot of the Jewish culture, like they're steeped in history, right? So like they remembered what Moses did with the Exodus. They remembered what Elijah did with this, and they wrote songs about it and praised him for it. Man, we need to be doing the same sort of thing practically. Like I've got to remember that God. Just really quick silly story. Like I lost my laptop about 6 months ago. It's just one of those things. I know where I left it, but when I went back to check, it was gone. Didn't have a clue. I've been praying, Lord, there's stuff on that laptop that I need. Like my life was there, and I'd finally come to the realization that I wasn't going to find it. Right. This last week, a lady emailed me, and lo and behold, it wound up being. Like she had taken it that day and not told anybody, and she thought it was somebody else's laptop, and whatever. But it's back at my house now after 6 months, and I thought that was never going to happen. You know, that was kind of a miraculous thing for me.
Yeah.
If I forget about that, and 6 months down the road, I'm like, oh, you know, God never does anything good for me. I've done God a disservice, and I forget. Like I'm a fast forgetter.
Yep.
So
you want more concrete work to do?
That's what I heard.
That's what I heard.
That's what I heard.
Not around the church, not anything that matters. Let's do concrete somewhere else. I don't know.
Oh, well, thank you guys so much for watching. Again, if you missed the sermon for Sunday, there will be a link in the description. We appreciate everybody that hung out with us. Leave us a comment. If you are watching, let us know. Come in on the story with us. But thank you so much for watching.
See ya.
It's been great.